Greg, I want to ask you some questions about the church year or the liturgical calendar or whatever the right language for it is. There's a sense in which a lot of different kinds of Christians observe some kind of syncing up with the church year. Christmas and Easter, right?
Sure.
Even nominal Christians, by which I mean not really Christians, who are in some way connected to the life of the church.
Right.
That's kind of what we jokingly say about them, right? Is they're Christmas and Easter Christians.
That's right.
But there's a further sense of the church year, which is not just those two major touch points. What's the value of engaging with that extended liturgical calendar?
Yeah, the liturgical calendar really is about, it's about marking time, but it's not about marking time. I think in many ways it just points you towards the answer to the question of what am I supposed to be doing now as I think in terms of living out the Christian life. So Advent tells you to focus on the coming of Christ. Christmas tells you to celebrate the coming of Christ. Lent tells you prepare for, associate with the death of Christ, not to anticipate the resurrection, but to sit uncomfortably in the death. So really just pointers, I think, towards the posture that we should adopt in our relationship to Christ, the Scriptures, the Church.
So one thing I hear there is I say Easter, Christmas, you say Lent and Advent. So I'm talking about days, and you're talking about extended periods.
That's right.
40 days in both cases?
Not quite definitely for Lent. For Advent, it's just simply based on when the day of Christmas falls.
Right. So
back
there's
up 4 Sundays prior to Christmas.
A lunar
Day.
calendar, trigonometry to work out there as usual.
That's right.
Yeah. But an extended period leading up to these 2 major days in the church calendar, or I guess in the case of Easter. I say Easter, but I mean Good Friday through Easter.
Sure.
I think Russell Moore recently wrote something about Christmas celebrations, and he's especially thinking of the Holly Jolly Christmas kinds of songs, not ringing true, not sounding real to a world that is well aware there's pain and suffering and trouble. And as I was thinking about that, I thought, well, if you were thinking Advent-y thoughts leading all the way up to Christmas, you'd get the Christmas joy, but it would be carefully preserved by an extended period of recognition of the evil of the world, of our need for the Christmas joy.
Absolutely. If you observe an Advent, for example, and you follow even a lectionary that's got the intentionality behind it of guiding Scripture reading as to what we should be thinking, you're going to start off on Advent 1, the first night of Advent, with brokenness. You're going to get the passages of brokenness from Isaiah. Matter of fact, Isaiah is the prophet of Advent for obvious reasons, the Christological nature of Isaiah. And you spend a lot of time mostly reading about disobedience and rebellion of Israel, and by extension that's paired with New Testament readings that don't just talk about it as Israel, but talk about it as the brokenness of the world. So Advent can certainly point in that direction, and I think it just does so naturally, and it does, I think, help you to enjoy the more trivial Christmas music, if that's a way to talk about it, because you're not forcing yourself to say, that's right, this music must be true, even though my reality and my daily existence tells me there's a tension between that music and what I'm actually experiencing.
Yeah.
So Advent lets you hold both of those things, because you're always in Advent thinking about the coming of Christ, first and second comings of Christ. So there's the hopefulness. And so as you sit through the pain of perhaps daily life and what you read in newspapers and see on TV, you're bearing in mind that yes, the world is broken, but the answer is coming.
Yeah.
It has come, is coming again. And so it does make sitting down to hear Christmas songs a little easier.
Though I never have to like, we need a little Christmas. We don't have to like that.
No, there's certain things we don't have to like, absolutely.
So advocates of an extended use or a greater importance of observing the church calendar will tend to point to a couple things. I want to ask you about the first one because you're a historian, and the second one, I suppose because you're an Anglican and you're probably familiar with this kind of literature that I'm talking about. One thing they'll say is it's so ancient. You know, you could, like Santa Claus, he's only, say, 19th century, but Advent traditions, these are ancient, like Abraham kept these. But when I look at Advent traditions in a number of ecclesial traditions, I think, well, some of them are pretty recent if you're taking the long view. Things like Stations of the Cross are 14th century, right? To my mind, that's new.
That's new.
But that's not old.
Yeah,
right?
Sure.
And a lot of our Advent things are like that, like pretty recent, late Middle Ages. And then, of course, they're a grab bag. There are bits and pieces of very ancient church traditions in there, but a lot of fairly recent stuff. recent in the big picture, 14th, 15th century.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, there's hints that are older than that hint towards periods of preparation. Mostly not so much with Advent, more with Lent. The preparation of the catechumens for their baptism was a clear period of development that we see all the way in the 3rd century, back in the 3rd century. Mm-hmm. Yeah, Advent is much more recent. Maybe the way to think about it, even in the 19th century, you would probably know Christmas is coming if you lived in England, because Dickens would be publishing another Christmas story. Right? There'd be the cricket and the hearth or something like that. It would kind of tell you, oh, that's the season. Christmas is in fact coming. Now it's, is it 3 purple and 1 pink candle, or are they supposed to be blue? And those
that's all kind of made up, right? The color of the Advent candles?
Absolutely. There's even for Anglicans, how penitential is it? Is that why we should go with purple? Is that why we should go blue? And these things, there's no historical precedent for it. The more important thing is to say, what do these symbolize? So as we use an Advent wreath at our own home, it's not so much the colors of the candles that matter, it's the significance of why we would light them, as Christ is the light of the world, and those kinds of things. Yeah. So I agree, you're not going to find a lot of ancient resources. They're mostly modern.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you brought up the Advent wreath. We get out the Advent wreath and people will want me to interpret it to them, and like, oh, well, you know things, tell us about the deep history of it. And I think, I'm trying not to be Grinchy here. Don't get me started on whether it's ancient or not. Let's just enjoy the wreath and think about Christmas is coming.
And my kids just love playing with the fire, so they can light the candles.
Yeah. So the other thing is, you've probably read some of this literature that has this kind of high romantic view of what we're doing by marking dates throughout the year, that we're rejecting Caesar's imposition of secular time, and we are hallowing time itself by I don't know, in some of the more purple literature, it's like extending the incarnation into the spatial. You know the literature I'm talking about?
Yeah, absolutely.
What do you make of that, and what's a more balanced view of what we're doing by syncing up with the church calendar?
Sure. I mean, there's a lot of hopefulness, I think, in trying to sanctify time in that way. I don't see much value in it, and personally that's a personal comment. So practically it's a personal comment, because I feel like my life revolves in 3 calendars. so there's a church calendar that I follow, but as a university professor, the fall and the spring semesters dictate that, and then of course I have to do my taxes based on an actual January to December calendar. So I think the sentiment has something to commend it. I don't think its execution is very well done. But I think that misses the point. It really, Advent, Lent isn't about time per se. It's not so much about 40 days, even though 40 is such a common image in the Scripture. It's about what does it point you towards. I mean, I just like to say Advent is a Christological season. It gives us a period of time to point ourselves and orient ourselves well to Christ. I'm not wondering if in Tuesday of the 2nd week of Advent, how is it hallowing this day, as much as how it's pointing me towards the Christ event that we observe uniquely on December 25th, of course, but for me it would be 12 days of Christmas. So again, time's important. I'm not trying to make light of time. I think we should redeem the time as Scripture tells us to do it. But I'm not sure if kind of that purple language, like you say, is doing well, as opposed to just saying, today, at this time, what I want to be doing is thinking of Advent as a way of directing me towards Christ in a unique way that looks different than what Lent will do.
The Torrey Honors Institute at Biola University. Biblically centered, great books, liberal education. More at biola.edu/Torrey.